Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I am Doug Cannon.
On this week's show, we look back at the draft while Jaromir Jagr tries to complete his dream of playing for every NHL team. And wait, how many Ovechkins are there?
I'm not sure. But we'll take a look at that later on in the show. We'll also take a look at some of the top free agency picks. And we'll wish George the Chief Armstrong a happy belated birthday.
Of course, all that and more. Let's drop the puck on episode 13. Episode 13, Doug Cannon, how you doing today? We got the draft to talk about. We've got a lot of free agency, but I do feel like we should start with the draft because it's kind of in the rearview mirror, but it, in a lot of ways, impacted free agency. You and I were there. We watched the draft together last Sunday. What were your thoughts early on in that?
Well, just to preface it a little bit, I mean, we both understood that it was going to be a deep draft. So the first thing that came out was I was expecting more moves.
Yeah, so was I. I really was.
I was expecting more draft picks and player shuffling and stuff to go on than actually happened. So that was my big thing. The top four guys that left or were chosen, I shouldn't say left, the top four guys that were chosen, no surprises.
No surprises that they were the top four guys.
And that's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
But the order of the four was the big surprise of the day, I thought.
Got kind of weird. And maybe I was the only person that had this perception, but my perception coming in was McKinnon, Jones, Drouin, Barkov were the clear top four, and then Valeri Nichushkin was number 5, with the potential to someday we look back and he's the best player in this draft. He at least has the potential.
I agree. He went 10, and I'm like, why is he so far down?
It seems like there's one or two players every year that really drops. Philip Forsberg last year, just all the promise in the world, he ends up dropping, and now Nashville gets him. A couple years ago, Cam Fowler and Brandon Gormley, two of the top defensemen in their draft, I saw them in scouting reports as maybe number 2 and 3 in the whole draft overall, and they dropped to 12 and 13, I believe. It just seems like there's always a player or two that does that, and this year it was Nichushkin.
And then going into last Sunday's draft, I mean, you and I were both talking about, who's 1 or 2? I mean, it was projected that Jones was always going to be number 1, McKinnon was going to be number 2, and then, McKinnon had a great Memorial Cup performance, and his stock rose, and of course Colorado chose him number 1. But prior to the draft, Colorado was like, we're not taking Jones.
Yeah, to their credit, I mean, it appears they were being honest. I mean, maybe it was posturing, but it doesn't seem like it now because they took McKinnon. I think they just liked McKinnon more, which, if that's the case, if I'm a Colorado fan, I'm fine with that. If you took who you feel is the best player, because at pick number 1, you have to take the best player.
Absolutely.
Unless he's a goalie and you have Pecorine or something.
Right. So then, then my first big eye-opener was the second pick of the draft when Florida took Barkov. And I'm like, okay, Seth Jones is on the board, but you're taking Barkov. Hindsight, it's a good pick.
It is. And Florida needs so much that, again, I think you just take the best player available. Here's Florida's defensemen that are signed after the upcoming season. So beyond this upcoming season, Brian Campbell, Ed Jovanovski, that's your whole blue line.
Oof.
Now, I mean, they've got young guys. They've got Eric Gunbjornsson. They've got Dmitry Kulikov. They've got other guys, so they're going to re-sign them fairly cheaply, so maybe that's why you don't take Seth Jones. If you think Barkov is as good as some of the scouting reports indicate he can be, then go ahead and take him. I mean, he's a center. There was a lot of centers taken early in this draft. You and I both know how important centers are to teams at any level, but particularly at the NHL. You said this last week. You build from the goal, the defense, and then up the middle. And
right.
The best teams do that. And a lot of teams last year took defensemen. A lot of teams this year took centers. I'm looking at the top 6 picks. 4 of them were centers. And they're hard to find. That's the other thing. So I don't have a problem with that pick, but it was just interesting that all of a sudden then you knew Tampa was going to take Jonathan Drouin because they love that guy. So then Seth Jones is sitting there at 4.
Yeah, and watching his face.
He was not happy.
It's like, man, what's going on? I'm supposed to be number 1.
What are you supposed to do if you're him? I mean, you did everything you could on the ice.
Well, we'll get into it in the next segment, but, I mean, he's on a really solid team. Going 4th actually worked out very well for Seth Jones.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you made the comment when we were watching it, he's losing millions of dollars every time he doesn't get picked, which is true.
Right.
But from his perspective, and look, from Nashville's perspective, I want one of those forwards because I already have defense and I already have great goaltending. But at number 4, you have to take Seth Jones because he might be the best player in this draft. I mean, that's a gift that he fell to you at that point.
Absolutely.
From Seth Jones' perspective, you're going to skate with Shea Weber. You're at least going to practice with him, whether you're on the top line or not. And you've got Rene in goal, and you're on a team coached by Barry Trotz that plays solid team defense. He's
in a win situation as a young defenseman. I don't think that if he gets the opportunity to play this upcoming season, I don't think he's going to struggle as much if he was on a Florida Panther team.
Well,
and I'm not trying to
true.
be mean. I'm just saying he's got players surrounding him that will help him succeed and have a good season.
Phil Housley's there too, isn't he? He's there. He's with Nashville in some capacity. So that now you have the guy that coached you in the World Juniors that is a defensive guru.
Yep.
So now you have that tutelage plus Shea Weber and the other guys that are there, and then Rene to clean up any mistakes you make. Yeah, from the very beginning, he is in a position now, aside from the fact that he's a good defenseman already on his own, just talent-wise, he's in a great position to not fail.
Right. And poor Florida last year, I mean, in 48 games only had 15 wins and 112 goals for. So
they need offense, and they lost their best player.
They need offense, and they lost their best player, which we'll discuss in the next segment. So they round out the top 14, because we looked at the top 14 last week.
Yeah.
Sean Monahan going to Calgary, I thought was a good pick.
Yeah, Calgary did. I guess we can get more into Calgary. They had 3 first-round picks in a year where you need to have as many first-round picks as possible for a team that really needs to rebuild. And I thought they did a solid job in the draft, and then just kind of did nothing in free agency.
Right. Darnell Nurse going to Edmonton was a good pick, I thought.
It was a no-brainer. I think that was the lock of the draft.
Yeah. What'd you think of the Vancouver pick?
Okay, so Buffalo takes Rasmus Ristolainen, and they get more size on D, and they did this quite a bit. But so you get to number 9, and this is where it was funny. Where we were at the draft party, you could hear everybody just kind of go, whoa, when this happened.
Right.
And on TV, you could hear it too. And the draft was in New Jersey, which makes it that much more interesting. New Jersey had the 9th pick. They trade it. They get Corey Schneider, which I think is a great deal for New Jersey.
Awesome deal for New Jersey.
You add Schneider. You have Brodeur in place, obviously, this year, but he's going to retire probably at the end of this year. It's probably going to be a condensed schedule because of the Olympics. So it's not like Brodeur's going to play every game anyway.
Right.
You can usher Schneider in, probably with no hard feelings from Brodeur, and then Schneider's your starter next year, only making $4 million a year, and then I would assume you're ultimately going to re-sign him so he's your long-term answer goal, because their backup goalie was 40 years old.
Right.
So what are you going to do? So from that side, I get it. From Vancouver's side, I get it because it's addition by subtraction because you had to get rid of somebody.
Sure.
I think you and I even said this on the first or second podcast. Why not just trade Schneider? He has more value.
And his price tag was low.
Easier to move. Luongo's not a bad goalie. I mean, took him to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. But here's the only problem with this. When it happened, I was like, okay, that makes sense. That's good. Now the more I think about it, you move Schneider because he has more value. You got a draft pick for him. You couldn't have got more than that for him?
Yeah, like a couple of lower picks in the draft or
Something.
even a player.
I think you should be able to get a player. New Jersey doesn't have any players, so you can't get anybody from them. But
well, they did, and again, I'm referring to the second segment. Toronto got him.
yeah. I mean, I just go back to when there was talks that Luongo might go to Toronto, and obviously it never happened, and we don't know that it was ever close, but there was names like Kadri being thrown around. There were good names.
Right.
Plus picks, and it didn't happen, so that was clearly too much for Vancouver to be asking for Luongo.
But in all fairness, that was a different management team in Toronto when those talks were happening.
That's true.
Okay, so now you got a different mindset running the show there. So I think that's what you're seeing.
But just the fact that those names were even brought up.
Yeah, I mean, why would you get rid of Kadri?
Yeah, that makes no sense.
That makes no sense
even,
whatsoever.
Even before he had the season.
So I at the level of 1-for-1, I agree with you.
They had to make a trade, but
that's the stuff that I didn't see in the draft that I was expecting. Was more of that.
yeah, because there were teams that didn't have first-round picks. There were the Rangers, there was the Bruins, there was the Penguins, and you would have thought those teams would have traded up to get a first. We heard it's funny. We heard that Schneider might get traded, and we heard that Tyler Seguin might get traded. Right. And Schneider did on draft day. Seguin got traded later. The Bruins don't end up getting a high pick in this year's draft out of it. We'll get more into that later as well, and it actually segues nicely into pick number 10, which is where Nikushkin goes.
And we both agree he's the sleeper.
I mean, if I'm sitting at 10 and I'm Dallas, I love that pick.
Yeah.
If
I agree.
The knock on him, if you can put it that way, is that he wants to play in the NHL right now or he's going to the KHL. And I get why teams get a little nervous about that stuff. You don't want to waste a pick and not have anything to show for it. But if he plays in the NHL, he could end up being the top 1 or 2 players in this draft. You got him at 10.
Yeah. Philly did okay with Samuel Morin. 12th was Phoenix with Max Domi. Great pick.
I love that pick. And I honestly think they benefited from the fact that Nichushkin fell so far to Dallas at 10.
Right.
Dallas doesn't take Domi. The Coyotes get him. There's your skill guy that you wanted. He can play center or wing.
Yep.
That's exactly what the Coyotes needed. I was shocked he was there at 12.
And then Winnipeg takes a D-man and Joshua Morrissey. No bells and whistles there. And then Alexander Wenberg for Columbus out of Sweden. So that's a quick recap of the draft. The top 4 went for. It was just the order that shocked everybody. And I guess the other big thing was Schneider leaving Vancouver, and Vancouver getting New Jersey's 9th pick.
And now Luongo has to become the starter again, which mentally, I mean, he's got a few months. He's getting paid a lot of money. So he has to do that. But that situation's been weird. That's almost like you're going to get divorced, and then all of a sudden
but
you
I
don't
don't
get divorced.
I don't think that decision. I don't think that problem's there anymore now. There isn't any. Is he first? Am I first? Am I backup? Is he backup? Is he going to play 50% of the time? Am I going to play 50% of the time? Tortorella's gone in there, and he's pretty much said, Luongo's my number 1 guy, and that's how we're approaching the season. And so that allows Luongo to be focused again and forget about the contract. It's not in play anymore. It's intact. None of the BS that surrounded that is there anymore. It's gone.
Yeah, and that's the best part of the trade for Vancouver. You cut all that out. I don't know if there's been bridges burned between Mike Gillis and Luongo. Luongo's handled this whole situation, I think, about as well as you can. I actually like him more than I did before this all happened. And again, he's getting paid billions of dollars, so I don't feel bad for him. But it's been a weird situation. And it took one final weird turn last week when they traded the guy that they had anointed the new goalie, and then they're just like, get out. We'll keep Luongo. You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter @HockeyPodcast for even more hockey news.
#do it.
Well, free agency opened up on Friday. So
I was painting the kitchen.
Thank
you, honey.
Answers my question of where were you when free agency started? When Daniel Alfredsson, well, we'll get to Daniel Alfredsson in a minute. Chicago and Boston, your 2 Stanley Cup finalists this past season, made some changes. And before I let you get into that, I will just point out that the LA Kings, your Stanley Cup champion from last season, made basically 0 changes heading into this year and nearly got back to the Cup.
And that's why I kind of wanted to start at this starting point, is the fact, if I win the Stanley Cup,
I want to keep my team.
I want to keep my team.
Dave Bolin scores the game winner, and he's gone.
It's like, come on, boys, what's going on here? And I just thought it was really, really weird. I mean, Chicago, let's start with Chicago. They lost 6 guys off of that roster.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot when we got down to the final 5 teams in this year's playoffs were the last 5 Cup winners. And there was a lot of carryover from the years they won the Cup. I mean, even Detroit, going back 5 years.
So what does that trend tell you?
You want to keep your players.
Right. Now,
Chicago, of those 5 teams, when they won the Cup, there was the weird stuff with the paperwork. Guys became free agents that shouldn't have been. They lost a lot of guys. They were so far over the cap, they had to get rid of guys last time they won the Cup. Mm-hmm. So they've done this before. They have Kane, Taves, Sharp, Hossa. I mean, they still have those main guys. They re-signed Bickle. But your point's well taken. They lost a lot of the role players that made Chicago so good. And they lost Ray Emery.
And what does a role player do, though? Think about...
He plays a role.
But think about that. I mean, he's not there to score 50, 60 goals. He's there as a utility guy to set up your stars, to give your stars a blow, to do specialty teamwork. That's where they get their extra ice. Your stars get your extra ice because they're being double shifted because they're talented. Your role players are there to perform a specific task and execute it when the coach says execute it. And you're not looking for that high output out of them. You want them to do what they're told to do. Those are key players.
Maybe an energy guy that's like a third-line center that then scores the game winner in the Stanley Cup. That every time a guy's hurt, Dave Bolin would come in and play on their line. You could put him wherever. Look, I get that just the way the salary cap is with the new CBA and it coming down a little bit, you have to make some changes. I get that.
Sure.
But I don't think Chicago is as good now as they were 2 weeks ago. Now, they're still one of the top 3 or 4 best teams in the league.
Absolutely.
But the one that really worries me, if I'm a Chicago fan, we haven't seen a repeat champion, since 98? I mean, it's tough to come back.
It's tough to come back.
And this year was Stanley Cup wrapped up later, so you're getting a shorter off season, so that grind.
And you mentioned it in the first segment, and I never thought about it until you mentioned it, is that once the deal is done, because I don't think it's finalized yet, once they determine the Olympic break, you're going to have 2 half compacted seasons.
Yeah. It's just going to be...
I just never even thought about it. And I'm like, okay, so now we're going to have last year, but in 2 separate parts.
Pretty much, yeah. And we've seen it before.
Sure.
But if you're Chicago, your backup goalie is Nikolai Habibulin. That's a little concerning.
Yeah, Habby's years are by him, don't you think?
And again, it's not like I think he's a terrible goalie, but if you're Chicago, your goal is to win the Stanley Cup. Your goal is not to make the playoffs.
Right. Your goal is to repeat.
And I mean, they had the best record this season. I do think there are teams that could have beat them that just never ended up playing them in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit almost did beat them.
Yeah.
But they're not unbeatable. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and they didn't lose any superstars, which you said. I think they did lose role players, but it goes back to my thing about chemistry in a room too. It's like those role players are good chemistry guys. They're the guys that kind of keep that fabric flowing from line 1 to line 4. Those guys are key. So let's go over to the Eastern and look at Boston and see what happened over there.
Well, they finally get a Ginla, which they thought they did back in February.
And they picked up Joseph Morrow, Louis Eriksson, but they lost Nathan Horton. They lost Seguin. Seguin is kind of a...
That confuses me.
They lost Andrew Ferentz, veteran D guy,
to Edmonton.
So, I mean, really not big, but it's, over a total, they lost 5 guys too.
Well, it's a different looking team. And
sure,
I guess, look, I was the first guy to rip Tyler Seguin for his performance in the playoffs. He had 1 goal.
Right.
You can't do that.
Nope.
But he was the number 2 overall pick 3 years ago. 2 years ago, he had 67 points. I'm surprised they soured on him so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, at the professional level, you're being paid millions of dollars to perform, and when you don't perform, it's what have you done for me lately? And you got GMs and coaches that unfortunately have to win today, not tomorrow, not 2 years from now.
That's true.
So, but I see your point. I mean, he is got the capability of putting out big numbers. I think in Boston's case, I think a lot of your role players stepped up in the playoffs.
That's what Boston does. They're not built to have like a superstar that scores a ton. I mean, Bergeron's a great player. I think hockey fans appreciate him more than just your average viewer.
Right.
That's what Boston is. It's a bunch of those guys. And they also did give all their money to Tuukka Rask. So maybe that's why you have to make some of these moves. And they wanted a winger, and I'm a huge Louis Eriksson fan. I mean, that guy can play hockey.
I just thought it was interesting that after the Stanley Cup final that the 2 top teams made a lot of movement.
Because last year we did not see that.
Yeah, I mean, there was just a ton of movement. That just surprised me. That's why I wanted to just kind of throw it out there. And I was like, wow. So let's now we're talking about the East and Nathan Horton. Good move for Columbus to pick him up.
I like that. I like that Columbus is a destination for guys now. I like that Nathan Horton looked around and he said, Columbus is a place I want to go. They traded for Marian Gaborik last year in the middle of the season. He wanted to go out of New York to Columbus. I like that.
Okay, and then on the tail end of that, we'll come back to Nathan, but I don't want to lose that thought. Another city, Phoenix.
I like that too. Very similar.
Picked up Mike Ribeiro because why?
Because he wanted
to go there. And it's finally, it's nice to see that cities like Columbus and Phoenix getting a little bit of respect, and players are looking at it as, those are cities where I want to go play.
And Columbus, in a way, is almost more remarkable to me. I mean, look, the Coyotes had the ownership situation, so that makes a little sense why they weren't bringing guys in, but they've been winning, and it's Phoenix in the winter. I mean, if you're a player, I can't tell you how many players from other teams I've had tell me, why wouldn't I want to be in Phoenix in the winter?
Yeah, or Anaheim.
Yeah.
Right.
Your off days, you're golfing.
Yeah.
And if you're in Canada, you're shoveling snow. So, but Columbus, I mean, you're shoveling snow there too. But Nathan Horton flat out said, I kind of want to go somewhere that's not as crazy about hockey maybe as Boston is.
Have you ever been to Columbus?
I've been through Columbus. So
you've never really spent time. It's a really cool, laid back. It's pretty. It's green. I mean, it's just a nice laid back. It's got that Midwestern feel to it. I mean, it's a fun city. I mean, it's not like a New York or a Toronto or Chicago. It's more of a
really.
No, it's just it gives you that laid back feeling when you're walking around the downtown core and stuff. And it's a pretty city, and that arena is gorgeous. So
well, and it is. I've heard that's one of the best, couple new arenas in the entire league. And look, now they have an interesting team. Not only do they have Gaborik and Horton, and some of those guys they got from the Rangers in the Rick Nash deal, and Sergei Bobrovsky, who just won the Vezina, they're in a new conference entirely.
Right.
So they're going into a tough division, but they're in a new conference.
And hopefully Horton comes back healthy. He's supposed to be having some surgery on his shoulder. I don't quite know what the exact injury is. But
it's a little worrisome when you trade for a guy that's having shoulder surgery.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Sign a guy.
After the guy was signed, then I found out he's got to have surgery, and he held off
till he knew where he was.
Till he knew where he was going. So hopefully it's not that major, and he does well for Columbus.
I like to see Columbus out there making an effort.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends in Columbus, and I just hope the team does well.
Well, I want to throw some other names at you so we can power through this segment.
Sure.
I'll start with the biggest one. Daniel Alfredsson, I'm looking at a graphic of him right here with a Red Wings logo behind his head. And
Weird,
it is just the weirdest thing ever. It is so strange to me.
I was only surprised with that in the sense that he said a couple of weeks ago that he was going to come back to Ottawa. And I went, that's great. He's been there his whole career. He's going to finish there. I think that's awesome.
1994? When was he drafted? 94 by the Ottawa Senators.
He would have had 18 seasons, and he's been the captain for like 17?
Well, that's the thing. Now, Shane Doan is the longest tenured captain in the NHL with
Correct.
the Coyotes. And there aren't a lot of players like Shane Doan and Daniel Alfredsson that stick with their team for their whole career.
Right.
But the thing with Alfredsson and Solani the last couple of years, it's been, okay, are they going to come back and play again? I mean, Alfredsson's 40. He'll be 41 in the middle of the season. Does he have it in him physically to come back for another full season? I mean, there was talk last year that if the whole season had been wiped out, he was done. He wasn't going to try and come back again after a full year off. But it was never a question of, will he come back? Where will he play? It's always, will he come back? And obviously he'll be on Ottawa.
Right.
And even with Solani, obviously he'll be on Anaheim. But he hasn't spent his whole career in Anaheim. Alfredsson spent his whole career in Ottawa.
I just did the rut-row.
Everybody did.
Because he had already committed verbally that, I'm going to come back to Ottawa. And then next thing you know, I'm hearing he's signing with Detroit. Hindsight, Detroit's in the East this year.
And so they'll play Ottawa a lot.
They'll play Ottawa 7 times.
They're in their division.
Not a whole lot of travel.
Yeah, no, I get that.
So that all, for an older player, I mean, that's great. He doesn't have to make any adjustments because he's going to know all the players. He stays in the same conference.
But he has to make the adjustment of a lot of people in Ottawa don't like him now.
For a few $1 million, I think he can get past that.
Yeah, but
Detroit also picked up Weiss from Florida.
Detroit's got a sneaky good team again. I mean, last year was supposed to be their rebuilding, and really they probably should have taken Chicago out in the second round. They were up 3-1 in that series.
Yep.
So their rebuilding is they have their, quote, old guys that are going to play for 8 more years, and Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg. Literally, I mean, they're early to mid-30s. They're not that old. It's not like they're leaning on Lidstrom and Holmstrom anymore.
Right.
Then you went out and you added guys like Damian Brunner, Gustav Nyquist that were scoring goals. You still have Johan Franzen. And, they go out and they add Alfredsson for this year, who obviously is going there because he thinks they can win the Cup this year.
Right.
Stephen Weiss. And they got the only 50-goal scorer in the entire draft.
And most guys want to win a Cup. So, Ray Bourque did it. Why can't Daniel Alfredsson do it?
But my question to you, and I think I know your answer, is Detroit really that much in a better position than Ottawa is?
I don't think so.
Look, if somebody said you have to play on one of these two teams, you have no ties to either, which one's going to win a Cup this year? I'm taking Detroit because of the reasons I just outlined.
Right.
But is it that much different? Ottawa's got Anderson, they've got Carlson, they've got the coach of the year, they've got Spezza back, they just added Bobby Ryan.
Stay healthy. It's an 82-game season.
Instead of 48.
Ottawa looked good in the playoffs. I think injuries just prevented them from going deeper.
So Alfredsson goes out on this note, which I don't know if he'll be welcome back in Ottawa now, coming back as maybe a front office job. And also his last couple games with Ottawa, remember the quote of, yeah, we can't come back and beat Pittsburgh, which turned everybody's heads there too. So maybe he just didn't think that team has what it takes right now.
And, as a player, you got to respect it. I mean, it's his heart and his gut telling him, this is what I got to do.
Do what you got to do. Okay, I'm going to throw a couple names at you really quick. Vinny LeCavier to Philadelphia.
It's awesome.
It's a great
deal. Great deal.
Philadelphia got bailed out because LeCavier went there for pretty cheap, and then Ray Emery.
And then Ray Emery leaves Chicago, goes there.
For less than $2 million.
Philly signs Giroux.
Yeah.
They're going to be set for a while.
Emery saved them because they were going to have all these pieces but no goalie, and he took so much less money than he could have got, I think.
Right. Philly's looking good. Philly's looking really good right now.
Edmonton, you touched on it. They go out, they add guys like Andrew Ferentz. They added defense in the draft. They had Boyd Gordon. So they had some gritty players.
I thought Edmonton played the free agency very, very smart and very crafty. I mean, they have a very, very young roster.
Skilled roster, too.
Skilled roster. I thought that their youth probably prevented them from getting into the playoffs and going deep. Now they've got this veteran core that they're adding. It will change the dynamics of the room. Hopefully the maturation of those youthful players will start, and that those veteran players will help that process. I liked what Edmonton did.
And I'm going to throw this out there, and I just want credit if it ever happens. I haven't heard this from anywhere else, so there's no inside information here. But it would make sense to me if Edmonton is rolling along this year and the only thing holding them back is goaltending, which it could be, because right now they have Devin Dubnyk as their starter, who I think some people are still kind of questioning if he's a full-time starter, take you deep in the playoffs.
921%.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't bad. Maybe he just keeps evolving. He's a young guy. But if they need to make a trade for a goalie, why couldn't they trade one of those skilled forwards to Toronto for James Reimer? Both teams solve a huge issue right there. Potentially. Maybe Reimer's still Toronto's starter. Who knows? But I'm just saying.
Well, I don't think Reimer's going to be Toronto's starter. I just don't see that happening.
Then why wouldn't Edmonton just ship one of those young forwards? They have so many that they don't need them all. Not now, but I'm saying maybe January rolls around and they realize, look, we're scoring a lot of goals, but we're giving up a lot of goals.
Yeah, I mean, but Reimer, he was an AHL player and stepped into a role in the condensed season. So maybe there's something scouts management sees that we don't see because we don't look through it, those sets of eyes, that they look at it way differently than you or I would look at it.
It's true.
I understand where you're coming from.
I think that there are goalies that can be traded for if they need one. Maybe they don't need one. My last team I want to throw at you, Dallas. Completely different team.
Totally different team.
New logo, new jersey, new GM, new coach. They add Sagan with the trade, Kushkin, like we just talked about. They pick up Sean Horkoff as well. I mean, they just went out there and just kept picking up players. But I think a lot of this is the GM. You get the guy that was Ken Holland's right-hand man in Detroit for all those years, and instantly he's just completely revamping Dallas's roster, and I think they're a lot better.
Dallas is 10 times better, I think, right now. And
Rich Peverley, too.
The Nil actually picked up director of amateur scouting from the Red Wings, too, I believe.
I mean, if you're going to – we've seen this in hockey before. You kind of see the front office move from one place and start to take shape in another, and we saw it when Chicago's guys went to Florida. If you're going to take the front office from a team, taking it from Detroit certainly isn't bad. That front office tree.
Right. And before we wrap up the segment, I just want a big shout-out to my boy Danny Briere. Great deal going to Montreal. I think it's awesome. Gets to skate with George Peros. Wonder how he's going to do in Montreal.
Oh, there you go. But, yeah, probably better for him to get out of Philadelphia, just the way that was all kind of unfolding.
You know what? And also in the free agent market, I liked what Toronto did. They got Bozak re-signed. They picked up Bolin.
Picked up Clarkson.
I mean, and Clarkson wanted to go to Toronto. So, I mean, a lot of teams are getting guys that want to be in that city.
That's the key.
They're not going for the check. Yes, they're getting very big paychecks, and, these guys deserve it. They've worked all their lives to get there. But I'm hearing a lot more of guys going to cities that they wanted to go to. They want to play for that organization.
That really is, you can sign a guy who's got all the skill in the world, but if he doesn't want to be there,
right?
There's two levels to that. He doesn't want to be there, or he really doesn't want to be there. Either way, you want a guy that wants to be there. Horton seems like he wants to be in Columbus. Ribeiro picked Phoenix. Those are the guys you want.
Right, absolutely.
And your point is the same there with Toronto, who's becoming a pretty dangerous team. The big names left as we record this, and this could change, but Grabowski, who's not in Toronto now.
No.
Yager, Tim Thomas. I'm guessing Ilya Bryzgalov may be finding himself in the KHL.
Who's going to take a gamble on Tim Thomas?
I just look at the teams that really need a starting goalie right now, and Calgary doesn't really have one. I don't think he'd go to Calgary. So,
what about Edmonton?
If I'm Tim Thomas and I'm looking around and Edmonton offers me $3 million a year to be the starter, I think that's a win-win for everybody. This is a proven Vezina winner that can win a Stanley Cup. He comes in with that young team. He's the goalie for maybe a year or two. Maybe Dubnyk just continues to develop behind them. I'm guessing Thomas isn't going to play 82 games a year. That makes the most sense to me. But maybe they like Dubnyk.
Yeah, just a year off is a scary thought.
Yeah, well, that's true. And Tim Thomas is an interesting guy. Let's just leave it at that.
You're listening to the Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
Final segment, news and notes. Just a couple things to get to here. Doug, I want to start with the NHL All-Star first and second teams. They were released this week. Obviously, all the awards were released in the previous couple weeks. So this is always kind of an interesting way just to see who some of the best players at their positions were for the season that maybe doesn't win the Vezina Trophy or the Norris Trophy, but still one of the better defensemen out there, one of the better forwards. I will draw your attention to the forward ranks. First team, Crosby center, right wing, Alex Ovechkin, left wing, Chris Kunitz. Second team, Jonathan Toews center, right wing, Martin St. Louis, left wing, Alex Ovechkin again.
How does that happen?
Are there two Alex Ovechkins? I feel like somebody needs to look into this. It's not fair if Washington gets two Alex Ovechkins.
And I haven't done any research on this, but has anybody ever played for both the first and the second team?
No.
So how does that even happen?
There needs to, unless it's the Ovechkin twins.
How does he get 591 votes for the first team and 217 votes for the second team?
The plural Ovechkins. Alex Ovechkins.
And where did he play most of the season?
Right wing.
Right wing.
And that's the thing. I get that he started the year as a left wing. I'm sure it was just a clerical error. I'm sure papers were drawn up at the start of the year and he had LW next to his name because that's where he's played most of his career. But it was not a minor story this year. He went on that tear where he was scoring a goal pretty much every night.
On the right side.
Because he moved to the right side.
And he had a freshman coach that made that change.
Told him, you're going to move to the right side. It was a big story even before he was scoring. Because
before the season even started.
Oates was taking him out of his comfort zone.
Yep.
And it turned out that it paid off, and it paid off so well that he won the Hart Trophy, and he's on two All-Star teams at the same time.
Oops. I don't see that happens. And then I want to point out, okay, so we got Ovechkin on two teams. Don't know how that happens.
It's chaos.
But you've got Martin St. Louis on the second team.
Yeah, I don't know what more Martin St. Louis can do. I mean, he wasn't even a finalist for the Hart. He led the entire NHL in points. I'm not saying he should have won the Hart. I mean, I think that one of these Ovechkins obviously had a great year, so he deserved to win it. Crosby was remarkable, and if he had played all year, and John Tavares carried the Islanders. So I don't have a problem with him not being.
And I know you're a Penguin fan, but let's put Kunitz on the second team and St. Louis on the first team.
Well, but then that would require us to have two right wings on the first team, and one of them we're not even sure is a right wing.
Hey, they're professionals.
Yeah, well, I do hear Ovechkin can play left if he needs to, so I'm sure you could have slid him over. I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore. Your defensemen, we should get to them. Ryan Suter, PK Subban.
That's solid.
First team. How about the second team? Chris Letang, who makes $1 billion a year now, and then Francois Beauchemin. Look at him just sliding in there on that second defense team.
I think the second team vote ballot needed to be fixed.
I feel like I'm looking to see if Gump Worsley is on the second team. I think the second team was like a joke team. Lundqvist is your second team goalie, which shows you how good of a year Bobrovsky had to be the first goalie. Quick note on Lundqvist. How much money is he going to make next year?
A whole bunch.
If you look at what some of these goalies are getting this year and pushing up over $6 million now, Lundqvist is an unrestricted free agent next year. A team's going to have to give him $65 million and just exercise the whole cap just on him.
I would imagine the folks at Madison Square Garden are already trying to put pencil to paper on what are we going to do at the end of the upcoming season. So
they're going to have to pass collection plates around at games like it's church.
Well, it's a good time of year for a lot of clubs right now. I mean, prospect camps are opening. They get to see most of the teams are bringing in all their draft picks, take a look at them, see where they're going to be assigned. And it's a fun time for fans You know?
because you're waiting in the middle. It feels like it's been 3 months since the season ended. I know it's been a week and a half, but still.
Yeah. It just kind of keeps the game going for me anyways. It's like I got something to look forward to.
To go into a rink, too.
To go into a rink, if it's in your city, if if you're lucky enough to live in an NHL city, you get to go and you get to watch these young guys. They're bubbling to be there, so it's a lot of fun. It's really light. So, and then, the good thing is prospect camps are going to end, and then about 4 weeks, training camp starts.
Yeah, I like that we've gotten to the point now where I can pretty much talk my way through the summer. Like, yeah, it's 4 weeks, but then you start to do, the math, and it's like you're going to sleep probably 6 hours a night, so you cut those hours, and you just realize you can eliminate a lot of hours that you don't have to wait through not having hockey. Prospect camp's huge because you get to see, depending when your team's prospect camp is, you get to see the guy they just took in the first round this year.
Seth Jones down in Nashville.
The Rangers had theirs last week.
Yeah, they were.
What's the hurry?
Ice time. I have no idea. They must have the circus is coming to Madison Square Garden.
Circus
I don't know.
just wreaks havoc on everything. So, but yeah, you get to see your first round pick this year. Generally speaking, you'll get to see your first rounder from last year, unless it's somebody that stepped right in and just started playing.
And I have a birthday wish I want to shout out there for.
It's not your birthday anymore.
It's not my birthday anymore. But yesterday, so happy belated birthday to George the Chief Armstrong.
Okay.
He was 83 years old yesterday.
Okay.
He played 21 years for the Toronto Maple Leafs, was their captain for 11 of those 21 years. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame of 1975.
Okay.
He's still an amateur scout for the club.
Wow. Okay. That's a hockey life right there.
And this is the key. He scored an empty net goal in Game 6 of the 1967 Stanley Cup Final to defeat the Montreal Canadiens. What better team to defeat if you're a Toronto Maple Leaf team, right?
Right, true, yeah.
To win the Cup in 1967. Significance?
How many Cups have they won since then?
Significance?
Okay, what's the significance?
That was the last time the Leafs won the Cup.
So they've won 0 Cups since then, okay.
But a happy belated birthday to George the Chief Armstrong.
Oh. Wow,
it was just an interesting tidbit I came across.
If it was if he was on Chicago, they would have traded him the next year because he scored the game winner.
Empty netter at that.
So Toronto last won the Stanley Cup 1967 on an empty net goal. There you go.
Against the Canadiens, though, it was against Montreal.
There you go.
So
they're looking better. Toronto's looking better. I don't trust Montreal, but Toronto's looking better for next year.
I think Montreal's a sleeper right now.
Maybe they get Yager. I mean, they talk about getting Yager every year.
He's still available, so it's possible.
And I think he's only played on 27 NHL teams, so that's one of the 3 he hasn't played for right now. So it's perfect for him. It solves a lot of problems right across the board. That is it for episode 13. Next week, we'll look at the ongoing story of free agency this summer.
And if there's any hockey news to be found, Luke and I will find it and bring it directly to you, the hockey fan.
Always so. For Doug Cannon, I am Luke Lipinski. Thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.